Hello and welcome to The Print. I am Aman, and in our great speeches series today, we revisit an address by Dr. B R Ambedkar. He delivered the speech in September 1943 at a trade union workers' study camp in Delhi, which was organized by the Indian Federation of Labour. We revisit this speech during Dalit History Month and days after Ambedkar Jayanti on 14th April. Earlier this month, factory workers in Noida protested for 4 days demanding higher wages, leading to clashes with police. The Uttar Pradesh government responded by increasing minimum wages by 21% in Noida and Ghaziabad. Similar protests in Haryana resulted in a 35% wage increase. In September 1943, Ambedkar, while addressing trade union workers, took a moment to reflect on parliamentary democracy. He examined why this system, which had come to be seen as the most advanced form of government, was already facing discontent across the world. He said, parliamentary democracy has all the marks of a popular government, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It is therefore a matter of some surprise that there has been a revolt against parliamentary democracy, although not even a century has elapsed since the universal acceptance and inauguration. End quote. Ambedkar noted that parliamentary democracy has failed not just in countries ruled by dictators, but also in countries where people are opposed to dictatorship. He then gave reasons why that is so. He said, if parliamentary democracy has failed to assure to the masses the right to liberty, property, or the pursuit of happiness, then the causes for this failure may be found either in wrong ideology or wrong organization, or in both. End quote. Explaining what he meant by wrong ideology, Ambedkar focused first on the idea of freedom of contract and how it worked in unequal societies. He said, what has ruined parliamentary democracy is the idea of freedom of contract. Parliamentary democracy took no notice of economic inequalities and did not care to examine the result of freedom of contract on the parties to the contract should they happen to be unequal. It did not mind if the freedom of contract gave the strong the opportunity to defraud the weak. End quote. He then connected the survival of democracy to conditions beyond former political rights, pointing to the role of social and economic equality. He said, political democracy cannot succeed where there is no social and economic democracy. Why parliamentary democracy collapsed so easily in Italy, Germany, Russia? Why did it not collapse so easily in England and the USA? To my mind, there is only one answer. Namely, there was a greater degree of economic and social democracy in the latter countries than it existed in the former. End quote. In this context, Ambedkar underlined how liberty had come to dominate democratic thinking without an equal commitment to equality. He said, democracy is another name for equality. Parliamentary democracy developed a passion for liberty. It never made even a nodding acquaintance with equality. It failed to realize the significance of equality and did not even endeavor to strike a balance between liberty and equality, with the result that liberty swallowed equality and has left a progeny of inequities. End quote. Moving from ideology to organization, Ambedkar described how political power tends to remain confined within fixed social groups. He said, all political societies get divided into two classes, the rulers and the ruled. This is an evil, but the unfortunate part of it is that the division becomes stereotyped and stratified so much so that the rulers are always drawn from the ruling class and the class of the ruled never becomes the ruling class. End quote. He then explained what this meant for parliamentary systems in practice. He said, parliamentary democracy, notwithstanding the paraphernalia of a popular government, is in reality a government of a hereditary subject class by a hereditary ruling class. It is this vicious organization of political life that has made parliamentary democracy such a dismal failure. End quote. From here, Ambedkar shifted his focus to the laboring classes themselves, arguing that their condition was also shaped by their own political approach. He said, if parliamentary democracy has failed to benefit the poor, the laboring, and the downtrodden classes, it is these classes who are primarily responsible for it. In the first place, they have shown a most appalling indifference to the effect of the economic factor in the making of men's life. End quote. He pointed to the absence of political ambition among workers when it came to controlling state power, calling it a bigger crime than they have committed against themselves. He said, they have developed no ambition to capture government and are not even convinced of the necessity of controlling government as a necessary means of safeguarding their interests. Indeed, they are not even interested in government. Of all the tragedies which have beset mankind, this is the biggest and the most lamentable one. End quote. In this context, Ambedkar drew a distinction between trade union activity and political power, explaining why one could not substitute for the other. He said, I am not against trade unions, they serve a very useful purpose. But it would be a great mistake to suppose that trade unions are a panacea for all the ills of labor. Trade unions, even if they are powerful, are not strong enough to compel capitalists to run capitalism better. End quote. He then outlined what would make trade unions more effective. He said, trade unions would be much more effective if they had behind them a labor government to rely on. Control of government must be the largest for labor to aim at. Unless trade unionism aims at controlling government, trade unions will do very little good to the workers. End quote. Ambedkar also addressed the relationship between labor and nationalism, describing how workers often committed themselves to broader political causes without examining their outcomes. He said, the working classes, who are beggared in every way and who have very little to spare, often sacrifice their all to the so called cause of nationalism. They have never cared to inquire whether the nationalism for which they are to make their offerings will, when established, give them social and economic equality. End quote. He went on to explain how this played out after independence movement succeeded. He said, more often than not, the free independent national state, which emerges from a successful nationalism and which reared on their sacrifices, turned to be the enemy of the working class under the hegemony of their masters. This is the worst kind of exploitation that labor has allowed itself to be subjected to. End quote. In the final part of the speech, Ambedkar laid out what labor in India needed to do, beginning with the need for an independent political organization. He said, it must declare that its aim is to put labor in charge of government. For this, it must organize a labor party as a political party. Such a party will no doubt cover trade unions in its organization, but it must be free from the narrow and cramping vision of trade unionism. End quote. He also argued that labor should not merge itself with existing political formations. He said, there is no necessity for labor to submerge itself in the Congress or the Hindu Mahasabha or be the camp followers of either, simply because these bodies claim to be fighting for the freedom of India. Labor, by a separate political organization of its ranks, can serve both the purposes. End quote. Finally, Ambedkar emphasized the importance of study and preparation, arguing that the question of whether labor was capable of governing would inevitably arise. He said, without knowledge, there is no power. When a labor party is formed in India, and when such a party puts forth its claim to be installed on the Gaddi before the electorate, the question whether labor is fit to govern is sure to be asked. Labor will have to prove positively that it can govern better. End quote. He concluded by welcoming efforts to build study circles among workers and expressed the hope that they would be accompanied by the formation of a political movement capable of representing labor in government. Thank you for joining us on Great Speeches. For more from The Print, become a subscriber at theprint.in/subscribe. I am Aamaan in Delhi.